Oh, darlings, if you think today's royals have a talent for tabloid drama, spare a thought for the Stuarts. They turned the throne into a veritable Tinder profile of excess, where crowns collided with codpieces in the most unseemly ways. Imagine swiping right on a king more interested in fondling favorites than forging alliances. From 1603 to 1714, the Stuart Dynasty was less about divine right and more about divine nights of scandal that would make modern reality TV blush. Buckle up, my gossipy geese. We're diving straight into the bedchambers where history got uncomfortably hot and bothered. But before we spill tea hotter than a steward's wandering eye, hit that subscribe button if you crave more historical hanky-panky. And tell me in the comments, are you watching from a rainy London flat or a sunny LA poolside? Is it high noon or the witching hour where you are? Now, the Stuart Dynasty, those merry monarchs who ruled Britain from 1603 to 1714, a time when the crown wasn't just heavy, it was positively heaving with indiscretion. Picture powdered wigs, plague-ridden streets, and palaces echoing with the whisper of illicit silks. In the spirit of scandalous pamphlets once murmured over afternoon tea, we're about to dissect their most notorious sexual escapades with all the sarcasm and wit they deserve. We'll mock their follies like jaded courtiers, draw shameless parallels to modern celebrity hookups, and gossip as if we're peeking through history's keyhole. After all, if Bridgerton taught us anything, it's that nothing spices up a dynasty like a dash of debauchery. We begin, naturally, with James I, the Scottish import who launched the Stuart era in England like a man stumbling into a brothel after a long Highland hike. James VI of Scotland became James I of England in 1603, uniting the crowns but dividing opinions about his private affections almost instantly. Here's the irony. A king celebrated for scholarship and the King James Bible, yet far more passionate in the letters he wrote to his male favorites. Pamphlets of the day buzzed with gossip about his tactile affections, less holy writ, more holy writhe. First came Esme Stuart, a cousin who arrived from France in 1779 and quickly became the apple of James's eye. James lavished him with titles and attention that raised eyebrows across the kingdom. Was it mentorship or something more? Historians still debate, but James's poetic devotion spoke volumes. Then there was Robert Carr, the handsome young page who caught the king's attention in 1607 after breaking his leg in a jousting accident, a meet-cute worthy of a Netflix drama. Elevated to Earl of Somerset, Carr became James's closest companion until scandal exploded with the infamous Overbury poisoning affair. James initially protected him, but Carr fell from favor once a newer fascination appeared. Enter George Villiers, the ultimate Stuart heartthrob who swept into James's life in 1614 like a perfectly timed courtly fantasy. Handsome, ambitious, and endlessly charming, Villiers rose rapidly to become Duke of Buckingham. James called him Steenie and wrote letters overflowing with devotion, declaring he would rather live exiled with him than endure life without him. If that doesn't sound like a royal romance teetering on obsession, I don't know what does.
Making complications complicated. It's like a president tweeting thirst traps at his chief of staff. Scandalous then, viral now. But James wasn't all one-sided. He married Anne of Denmark in 1589, a union arranged like a bad blind date, producing heirs including Charles I and Elizabeth. Yet gossip persisted. Anne reportedly quipped that James preferred his boys to her bed. In an era where sodomy was a capital offense, irony alert, punishable by hanging, yet the king hung out with his lovers freely, James's preferences were an open secret, fueling satirical verses and court intrigue. His reign set the tone for Stuart shame, power through passion, downfall through desire. Now, contrast that with his son, Charles I, the straight-laced, pun intended, successor who ascended in 1625 and tried to play the faithful family man amid a dynasty of deviants. Charles was the anti-James, rigid, formal, and devoted to his French Catholic wife, Henrietta Maria, whom he married by proxy in 1625 after a disastrous Spanish courtship escapade. Picture this: young Charles and Buckingham, yes, that Buckingham, his dad's favorite, disguised as Tom and John Smith, to woo the Spanish Infanta in 1623. It flopped spectacularly. Think a bad episode of Undercover Boss meets The Bachelor. Back home, Charles wed Henrietta, but their early years were stormier than a Civil War battlefield. She was fiery, he was frosty. It took months for consummation, gossip mills churning with tales of royal impotence or indifference. But oh, how things heated up. By 1628, with Buckingham assassinated, karma perhaps, Charles and Henrietta became the power couple of the era, popping out 9 children like it was going out of fashion, including future kings Charles II and James II. Pamphlets praised their fidelity, a rare Stuart virtue, but irony strikes. During the English Civil Wars, separated from his queen for years, Charles allegedly dipped into extramarital waters with Jane Warwood, a fiery redhead smuggler who snuck gold into his prison and, rumor has it, more intimate comforts. Warwood's letters were coded, but historians decode them as steamy. Imagine texting your side piece during lockdown, 17th century style. Charles, the Martyr King, beheaded in 1449, went to the scaffold with a reputation for piety. But that Warwood fling adds a delicious layer of hypocrisy. Modern parallel? It's like a politician preaching family values while sliding into DMs. Eternal irony for the ages. Society at large during these early Stuarts was no prude's paradise. Bawdy poems circulated like viral memes. Libertines like the Earl of Rochester penned odes to phalluses, and prostitution thrived in London's shadowy alleys. Attitudes towards sex were judgmental. Women cross-dressing? Scandal. Homosexuality? Whippings or worse, unless you wore the crown. Pornography? Etchings by artists like Carracci depicted explicit acts, hidden in noble libraries. Marriage was a contract, often loveless, with rape within it barely acknowledged. Husbands owned their wives' bodies, a grim irony in an age of chivalry. The Stuarts embodied this duality, divine rulers indulging human vices, their bedchambers battlegrounds for power and pleasure. And so, from James's boyish delights to Charles's wartime wanderings, the early Stuarts proved that absolute power corrupts absolutely, in the sheets at least. Tune in next time for the Restoration rakes who turned scandal into an art form. You won't believe what Charles II did with his scepter.
Darlings, after the pious pretensions of the early Stuarts, enter Charles II, the merry monarch who restored the throne in 1660 and promptly turned Whitehall into a glorified swingers club. If James I preferred his favorites and Charles I stuck mostly to one wife, Charles II collected mistresses like Pokemon cards, fathering a brood of bastards while his poor queen played eternal third wheel. Think modern celebrity with a harem app. Swipe right on actresses, nobles, and French spies. Scandal guaranteed. Oh, my salacious sweets, welcome to the Restoration, the glittering, gin-soaked era when Charles II swept back from exile in 1660 like a debauched rock star reclaiming the stage after a Puritan blackout. Theaters reopened, wigs towered, and morals plummeted faster than a courtesan's neckline. Pamphlets of the day dripped with irony, the merry monarch preaching divine right while exercising his divine rights in every alcove. Modern comparison, it's like if a pop icon survived cancellation, returned triumphant, and turned the tour bus into an endless orgy, complete with groupies elevated to duchesses. Gossip flew like confetti. Court wits like the Earl of Rochester penned verses equating love to conquest, religion to rubbish, and fidelity to folly. The Restoration rake wasn't just naughty, he was a philosophy, Hobbesian hedonism in velvet breeches. Charles, tall, dark, and devastatingly charming, those brooding eyes could melt a nun's habit, had honed his appetites in French exile. Back on the throne, he married the pious Portuguese Catherine of Braganza in 1662, a political match drier than communion wine. Poor Catherine suffered miscarriages, no heirs, and the humiliation of Charles's open infidelities. Yet she endured with dignity, even befriending some rivals. Irony abounds, the queen who couldn't conceive surrounded by a nursery of royal bastards. First in the parade of paramours, Barbara Palmer, née Villiers, the fiery beauty who hooked Charles pre-Restoration and reigned supreme in the 1660s. Married to the cuckolded Roger Palmer, elevated to Earl of Castlemaine for his troubles, Barbara burst into court like a Regency villainess at a ball, demanding, extravagant, and unapologetically fertile. She bore Charles 5, possibly 6 children, all acknowledged and titled, Dukes of Southampton, Grafton, Northumberland. Pamphlets savaged her as a curse of the nation, draining the treasury with jewels and gambling debts. Modern parallel, a high-maintenance influencer bankrupting her sugar daddy while flaunting affairs. Barbara bedded playwrights, boxers, even young John Churchill, future Duke of Marlborough. Charles, ever the ironic romantic, quipped about her temper but couldn't quit her until the 1670s, when newer models arrived. She retired as Duchess of Cleveland, still scheming. Enter the comic relief, Nell Gwynn, the orange girl turned actress, rags to riches icon of the age. Born around 1650 in London's bawdy underbelly, Nell sold fruit in theaters before strutting the stage. Pretty, witty, and utterly irreverent. Samuel Pepys swooned over pretty, witty Nell. Introduced to Charles around 1668, possibly via the Duke of Buckingham plotting against Barbara, she became his enduring favorite. No noble titles for Nell, she stayed refreshingly common, hosting raucous parties and bantering with the king. 2 sons, Charles and James Beauclerk, the elder made Duke of South Albans. Stories abound. Nell allegedly slipped a laxative to rival Moll Davis before a royal rendezvous. When a mob mistook her coach for French mistress Louise de Querouaille and jeered the Catholic whore, Nell leaned out proclaiming, "Pray, good people, be civil. I am the Protestant whore." Pure gold. Unlike grasping rivals, Nell asked modestly for pensions, charming the public while tormenting Louise, nicknamed Weeping Willow or Squintabella. On his deathbed, Charles begged his brother, "Let not poor Nellie starve." Heartwarming hypocrisy. Then the French import Louise de Querouaille, sent by Louis XIV in 1670 as a diplomatic honey trap. Noble-born, tearful, and Catholic, she played hard to get before succumbing in 1671. Elevated to Duchess of Portsmouth, she bore Charles a son, Duke of Richmond. Extravagant and influential, Louise pushed pro-French policies, earning hatred as a papist spy. Pamphlets portrayed her as a weeping succubus draining England. Rivalry with Nell was legendary. Nell mocked her accents and airs, once dressing in mourning for the Sham of Tartary to parody Louise's grief over a distant French prince. Modern vibe? International intrigue meets reality TV catfights. Charles juggled more. Actress Moll Davis, one daughter, Hortense Mancini, niece of a cardinal, wild and bisexual, and fleeting flings. He acknowledged at least 12 to 14 illegitimate children, ennobling many sons into dukes, Grafton, St. Albans, Richmond, whose descendants pepper today's aristocracy, even linking to Diana and Camilla. No legit heirs, though. Irony, the virile king sterile in marriage. The court mirrored this libertinism. Rochester's satire celebrated and critiqued endless conquests. Plays like Etheridge's The Man of Mode glorified rakes. Sex was power. Mistresses influenced appointments, policies. Yet backlash brewed. By the 1680s, weariness set in amid Catholic fears. Charles died in 1685, converting secretly. Scandal to the end. His eldest bastard, James Scott, Duke of Monmouth, handsome Protestant hope from exile fling Lucy Walter, led the 1685 rebellion against Catholic uncle James II. Proclaimed king in Taunton, Monmouth's pitchfork army crumbled at Sedgemoor. Captured, beheaded, tragic end to Stuart's side branch dreams. Thus, Charles II's scepter swung freely, scattering seeds of scandal across the realm.
proving monarchy's perks include a very crowded bed. Next time, we'll venture into James II's disastrous dalliances and the fall of the Stuarts. Prepare for Catholic queens and courtroom climaxes you couldn't script. My delectable deviants. After Charles II's merry carousel of mistresses, enter his brother, James II, the Catholic king who thought converting the nation would be easier than keeping it in his breeches. A man so devoted to his second wife's bedchamber intrigues that he lost 3 kingdoms over them. James proved that nothing sinks a dynasty faster than a queen who treats the court like her personal Tinder for papal plotters. Modern equivalent? Swapping Anglicanism for OnlyFans-level Catholicism. Shocking then, cancel culture kryptonite now. Darlings, the glitter of the Restoration had barely faded when James II ascended in 1685, converting the throne from party palace to papal outpost with all the subtlety of a firework in a nunnery. Charles II's charming libertinism gave way to James's dour devotion. Yet, irony of ironies, the most prudish-sounding Stuart managed to ignite the greatest sexual political scandal of the age, one that smelled distinctly of bedroom manipulation and foreign fingers in the royal pie. Pamphlets exploded like today's Twitter storms, accusing the court of everything from Jesuit sodomy to queens faking pregnancies. Gossip was weaponized. Sedition became sedition. Welcome to the endgame of Stuart shame.
James had form, of course. As Duke of York in his brother's reign, he'd been no monk. His first marriage to Anne Hyde, a commoner and daughter of Charles II's minister Clarendon, was a shotgun affair in 1660 after she fell pregnant. Anne, sharp-tongued and Protestant, bore him 8 children, only 2 surviving, future queens Mary and Anne. But James, ever the wandering Catholic convert, he flipped in the late 1660s, kept mistresses on the side. Arabella Churchill, tall, plain sister of the future Duke of Marlborough, gave him 4 illegitimate children, including the dashing Duke of Berwick. Then the actress Catherine Sedley, witty and Protestant, became his open favorite in the early 1680s. James showered her with titles, Countess of Dorchester, and quips. When critics called her ugly, he retorted she was punishment for his brother's sins with pretty women. Catherine mocked his Catholicism mercilessly. It can't be my beauty, for I have none, nor my wit, for he has none, yet pocketed the perks. Modern parallel? The original birther conspiracy. Think royal QAnon, complete with anonymous letters claiming the real baby died and a miller's son was substituted. 7 bishops petitioned against James' pro-Catholic policies. He imprisoned them, accelerating revolt. William of Orange, married to James's Protestant daughter Mary, was invited to invade. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 saw James flee to France, abandoned by army and allies, his warming-pan prince in arms. The irony, a king obsessed with legitimate Catholic succession lost everything over a legitimacy scandal cooked up in his own bedchamber. Exiled in Saint-Germain, the Jacobite court became a hothouse of continued intrigue. Mary of Modena ruled as queen in exile, raising her son with rigid piety, while James sank into melancholy and mistresses. He took a late-life favorite, Catherine Sheffield, risking another bastard line. But the real lingering scandal was sexual-political. Jacobite propaganda painted William and Mary, now William III and Mary II, as usurpers, with lurid verses accusing William of preferring male favorites, echoing James I, and Mary of barren lesbian leanings.
Meanwhile, Queen Anne, James's younger daughter, who succeeded in 1702 after William's death, had her own whispered sapphic scandals. Anne's intense friendships with Sarah Churchill, Duchess of Marlborough, and later Abigail Masham, fueled pamphlets alleging unnatural affections. Sarah's furious letters after falling out read like a toxic breakup. Gossip claimed Anne and Abigail shared more than politics in the royal bed. In an age when female same-sex acts were barely criminalized because unimaginable to male lawmakers, the irony was delicious. The last Stuart queen accused of the very preferences her great-grandfather James I embodied openly. Anne's reign saw the Stuart direct line fizzle. 17 pregnancies, no surviving heirs. Her Jacobite half-brother in exile represented the Catholic claim, but after Anne's death in 1714, the crown passed to distant Protestant Hanoverians. The Stuart Dynasty ended not with a bang, but with a warming pan-whimper, scattered across Europe in penniless pretense. Society's sexual mores had shifted too. The libertine Restoration rake gave way to early Georgian politeness, yet pornography flourished underground. Moll Flanders-style novels titillated, and coffeehouse gossip replaced court scandal. But the Stuarts' legacy lingered. Their acknowledged bastards seeded half the British aristocracy. Their bedroom blunders shaped constitutional monarchy. No more absolute kings indulging absolute appetites without consequence. And so the Stuarts bowed out, crowned in lust, dethroned by lust's suspicions, proving that in monarchy, as in modern dating, nothing ends a dynasty quicker than a questionable swipe right on religion and reproduction. Next time? Well, darlings, this was the finale, but if you crave more historical bed hopping, the Hanoverians are waiting with their own delicious disasters.